This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch or get 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. Hey, Richard, why does everyone in Middle-earth have the same font, the same handwriting? It's uncanny.
Bad production design.
like all the street signs in the Shire are that same kind of curvy fantasy font, and then when you see Bilbo writing his book, it's the same fantasy font, and then at the end of Return of the King, when Frodo writes The Lord of the Rings by Frodo Baggins, it's the same damn font. What is going? Well, I shouldn't say font. I guess it's handwriting, but it is font. It is a font.
Yeah, typeface.
Do you think Elijah Wood and Ian Holm and anyone else who wrote in these movies learnt how to do that handwriting?
Well, do you reckon that's just Ian Holm's handwriting? Because this is the first one we see.
That's true.
And then they based the entire of Middle Earth's literature.
Yeah,
off
it's
that.
like how Tom Hanks based his Forrest Gump accent off how young Forrest Gump talked. Wow. That's a really good insight. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Film Franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. My name is AJ, and I'm joined here by Richard Martin. Did I pronounce that right?
Son of Wayne.
Richard, son of Wayne. And I am Alexander, son of Justin. This is fun.
We're having fun. And
we
that's the
are
main
having
thing.
fun, though. So this is... a franchise, a podcast where we cover film franchises. When was the last time we explained that up top?
This is a film franchise where it's about podcasts.
Well, there will be one day, and it'll be our biopics, and they'll make it more than one film just so it qualifies as a franchise, as like a cheeky little nod.
Yeah, but the third one will go straight to TV.
The third one will be at least 30 minutes shorter than any of the other ones in the series, and really just feel like the crumbs left at the bottom of the cookie jar.
The person who played you didn't return for the second one, but they come back for the third one.
Old Zach Galifianakis, he's a busy man.
Yeah.
So, today we're continuing on our journey through Middle-earth. 2 weeks ago we covered the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Arguably one of, if not the best film franchise of all time. You won't find many people these days who can confidently say that these are bad movies, because they're not.
Sure.
And now we're going on an expected journey to really get the whole enchilada, because we like to do that when we cover franchises.
Oh man, we love enchiladas.
And we're not just gonna...
Enchiladas are a thing that you tend to have multiple of at a time. It's not like it's difficult to eat one.
No, exactly. And we love enchiladas so much that we like to watch every single edition of a franchise as possible. So, look, the Hobbit trilogy from 2012 to 2014 is considered inferior to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but it's still part of the legacy, and so we're going to watch it. And not only are we going to watch it, I consider this part of the Middle-earth overall franchise. Well, it is, but
it's not a hot take.
No, but when people say Lord of the Rings is the greatest franchise ever, it's they do have 3.
Half of them are bad.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. So the films that we're going to be talking about today, if you've never heard of The Hobbit, which you have, but if you haven't,
come on, you have.
We're talking about The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, which came out in 2012, The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, which came out in 2013, and The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, which came out in 2014. They were all, once again, directed by Peter Jackson, who directed the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And let's take a guess, Richard, of what they have on Rotten Tomatoes.
Unexpected Journey, I'm going to go mid-70s.
Okay. What do you think for Desolation?
Desolation, I think, would be the highest one. So I'm going to maybe say high 70s, low 80s.
Okay.
And then the Battle of the Five Armies, I'm going to say just below fresh, so like mid to late 50s.
All right, so The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey has 65% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Interesting.
The Desolation of Smaug has 74% on Rotten Tomatoes. And The Battle of the Five Armies has 59% on Rotten Tomatoes. So the only one to not be fresh, as Rotten Tomatoes calls it.
Interesting.
And I'd argue that Desolation of Smaug is the only one with like a score you'd hear and be like, oh, I might go check it out at the movies then.
Yeah.
Because if a new Lord of the Rings comes out and only gets 65% on Rotten Tomatoes, that's like, I don't know. I feel like that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Sorry, just taking a drink of my water. So look, we are dealing with something very upsetting to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. If you thought that the Lord of the Rings episode was a deep dive into how the trilogy kind of changed our country of New Zealand for the better, this one, in every single aspect, the Hobbit trilogy is like the opposite effect, like both personally and nationally, from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. For us and the people involved.
Yeah, exactly. So the trilogy was based mostly on J.R.R. Tolkien's original novel, The Hobbit, from 1937, which was published nearly 20 years before The Lord of the Rings, which I think is one of its first biggest problems, right, is that the movies are a prequel, but the book wasn't a prequel. So a lot of the stuff that the way a prequel is written isn't how The Hobbit was written, so it needed to be adapted so that all these things were prequely. Though large parts of the Hobbit trilogy are based upon the appendices in Return of the King. I'm not 100% sure on what an appendices is. Do you want to take a stab at that?
It's like the additional notes.
Right. So I heard somewhere a long time ago that apparently at the end of Return of the King, Tolkien wrote a bunch of notes that was like, I'm going to rewrite The Hobbit. Here's the things I want to change. Here's the things that I left out. And then he died.
Yeah. Appendices refers to a tube-shaped sac attached to an opening into the lower end of the large intestine in humans and some other mammals.
And if your appendices gets infected, it could burst and spoil the whole franchise.
Appendicitis.
Which is maybe what happened.
It's like it's at the end. It's a section or table of subsidiary matter at the end of a book or document. So it's like a glossary, I guess. It's
interesting that he even wrote them, because like if I had ideas for like how I wanted to change my personal IP, I probably wouldn't spoil it by like putting it at the end of a book, end of the last book, and be like, I'm going to change all these. But it's good that he did, I guess, because we got these 3 great movies.
And you're not like considered one of the great authors of all time. So what the fuck do you know?
Yeah,
idiot?
That's true. No, you're right. You're correct. What are these films about, Richard? Let's go through.
All right.
One by one. And
okay. Well, I think I've cracked the plots of these films. Mm-hmm. So what you need to do is look at the title.
Oh my goodness.
So An Unexpected Journey, you have a character, Bilbo, who's not expecting to go on a journey, and then he does.
What?
Yeah. Okay, so...
But wait, you said that he wasn't expecting to.
Yeah.
Well, that's
He changed his mind real easily.
Well, yeah, okay, first issue. He needed to have a desire for adventure established before being coaxed into going on an adventure, right? That was my first thought. All right, continue.
Okay. Bilbo's tricked into hosting a party for these 13 dwarves. Mm-hmm. That's the right number, 13.
Yep.
And then led by Thorin, who's the grumpy one. Mm-hmm. So he hates elves because they didn't help his granddad.
That's such an important part that you're like trivializing, like it's just a silly thing.
So the dwarves, they want to recruit Bilbo as their burglar, so that they can get the MacGuffin from the Mount MacGuffin.
Yeah, fair enough. A lot of MacGuffins in these films.
And then a bunch of stuff happens, and there's an orc Azog, who has it out for them.
Yeah.
And then also Bilbo gets the one ring off Gollum in the best scene of the movie.
Yeah, sure. So a couple clarifications. They're trying to get the Arkenstone from Erebor, and Erebor was the dwarf homeland which Smaug the dragon came and took over.
The Lonely Mountain.
The Lonely Mountain. And the dwarves were cast out, and now they don't have a home. They did turn to the elves, but the elves said no. And so they've been wandering, and now apparently there are good omens in the world that indicate that it's time for the dwarves to reclaim their homeland.
Yeah, sure.
Something like that.
So then if we look at the Desolation of Smaug, that's the one with Smaug and his this real desolate location. So we're still on this adventure. There's some spiders, like we had in Return of the King. And then we meet Legolas and Toriel and Legolas's dad, Thranduil.
The three best characters in the movie.
And so Legolas obviously lives in a place called the Uncanny Valley. And then...
also known as Mirkwood.
Yeah, then we also meet the Bard, who is the character who looks the most like Orlando Bloom in the film.
His name is Bard. He's not a bard.
Oh, right, yeah. But we meet Bard, who looks like Will Turner.
Yeah, he's a boatman or a bowman, depending on what he does.
Yeah.
And imagine if there was. Do you think there's a bard that lives in Lake Town and he's called like Boatman?
So the dwarves get captured. They float downstream in some barrels, and there's some very egregious camera work, which I'm sure
there's a GoPro.
There's a GoPro, and it's like because when I saw this film in the cinema, I was like, fuck, that was a dumb decision having those GoPro shots in there. And then I was like, surely it can't be that bad. And I watched it again and I was like, it is.
Luckily, though, it is the only dumb decision made in the entire Hobbit trilogy from the director. Though,
so then some other plot stuff happens. They get to Lake Town and they meet Stephen Fry, and then they go to the Lonely Mountain, and then they encounter a very small hiccup and immediately give up.
Yeah, it's so weird, eh? It's like, holy shit, you haven't even looked. You haven't tried hard enough at all. Also, so the hiccup is that they can't find the keyhole for the door, and the last light of Durin's Day is supposed to indicate where it is, which Durin's Day, I think, is the end of September or something like that.
Yeah, it's like annually, yeah.
Yeah, but does that mean the whole time we've been on a time... like a countdown? Like, have they been racing against the clock?
There's a ticking clock this whole time, and we didn't know.
I had no idea. And they get there just in time as well, and everyone's still like poddling around like Lake Town for a while before they go.
Or were they? Were they waiting in Lake Town for like weeks or months, and then up to the Lonely Mountains like a day trip?
Yeah,
and they were like, "Oh, okay, it's Durin's Day. Let's head up."
Yeah,
because I mean, if it's only the last light of Durin's Day that can do it. You know, it's not like you can go earlier.
True.
So, you know, presumably they were waiting in Lake Town and timed it to go. But the fact that they get there with like seconds to spare.
Yeah.
I mean, because you think they'd go up, plan, so they've got like, you know, a 6-hour buffer just in case they encounter more spiders or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, okay, we'll just wait for the last light of Durin's Day. But they're like, oh, quick, find the keyhole. We've got 18 seconds left. And then the sun goes down, and they're like, oh, okay, well, guess that's my life's work. Turn into a fucking joke. And then he just, so they decide to go home, and Bilbo's like, are you fucking serious? Like, let's try something else. And then he waits like 30 seconds, and the moon comes out. And turns out the moon's the last light of Durin's Day, and it reveals the keyhole, and they go inside the mountain, where they meet Smaug, who, after waking up at the end of the previous film, is now fast asleep. So yeah, the first film ends with it cuts to inside the Lonely Mountain, and some gold falls, creates a like landslide, and then it reveals Smaug's eye, and he wakes up, and then the same thing happens in this film. So I don't know if that was like, here's a teaser from the next film, or if it was supposed to be like, this is happening, and then he just fell asleep again.
Maybe he just has a regular sleep cycle. It's not like they got there within a couple of days or anything.
So then Bilbo finds the Arkenstone, and then they have a big fight with Smaug, and he eventually escapes the Lonely Mountain, and then Bilbo's like, oh fuck, and then the film ends.
Yeah, so, the best scene from An Unexpected Journey is when Bilbo encounters Gollum, and it's this, awesome little, kind of stage play almost. And then the best scene from Desolation of Smaug is when Bilbo encounters Smaug, and it's like this majestic dragon who's voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch with this really great voice. I can't wait to hear what set piece or exciting character or exciting scene we've saved for the final film in the trilogy.
Yeah, it's funny that if you want to see the non-CGI version of the best scene in those films, you can watch either Black Panther or Sherlock to see Martin Freeman act against the person playing them.
Yeah.
And then Smaug has just escaped to destroy the nearby town.
Oh man, this is going to be a good movie. I can't wait for the climax of the movie to be the Hobbit defeating the dragon.
So Smaug destroys the nearby town, but is killed by Bard, who
you skipped the whole movie, Richard. That's odd.
Shoots him. No, this is the first, very early on in the film.
This is the first 12 minutes of the movie.
And so Bard shoots an arrow into his one weak spot. He's missing a scale, and shoots a black arrow into him. And then the five armies have a big battle, and then a bunch of people die.
to specify some of the
so
states
you've got
of the five
elves,
armies?
dwarves, orcs, men, eagles. There's some wolves.
So, okay, I wrote it down if you're interested. Maybe you're not. So the five armies in the movies are the dwarves, the elves, the men of Lake Town, which I don't know if they're an army, the orc army from Dol Guldur, which sounds like Dumbledore, and the orc army from Gundabad. In the book, though, the five armies are the elves, the men of Lake Town, the dwarves, the eagles, and the orcs. So
because the eagles show up in this movie as well. So there's because I was going to write it on here, so I was like, wait, what are actually the five armies?
Yeah.
And then it's there's these 9 kind of count. In the book, it's these 5. In the movie, there's these, and then apparently it's revealed in a behind the scenes part of the behind the scenes stuff. They're these are officially the 5, and it's okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
So a few people are killed. Thorin for one, and then Bilbo's oh, I've just lost my best friend, and it's he's been nothing but rude to you for 30 months.
Yeah.
And then Keeley, who's the sexy elf, he was caught up in a love triangle with Toriel and Legolas. Just
beautiful storytelling.
And then Bilbo returns home, and after a minor inconvenience, everything's fine.
You missed one of the dwarves who died. That's so sad.
Oh, wait, yeah. Who's the other one?
Feely and Keely both die. So I think they're brothers.
The sexy bros.
Yeah, so the Battle of the Five Armies is kind of over the Arkenstone, but I think it's also over getting past Erebor. I think the orcs want to move past Erebor, I think. It's so complicated,
it's so
man.
Stupid.
And so I also read, apparently, Gandalf's his B story in the second two films is actually supposed to be he realizes that Sauron is coming back, and so the reason why he wants the dwarves to reclaim the mountain is because he wants Smaug to be destroyed before Sauron comes back, so that he can't join Sauron. Apparently that's implicit in the movies.
Yeah, I
did not realize that.
I never really followed Gandalf's B plot.
It's hard to follow.
But since we're talking about Bilbo encountering people as being the best scene in the film, so in this one, after the Battle of the Five Armies, they're just sitting down, and he's sitting down, and then Gandalf comes and sits with him and just cleans out his pipe, and it's the best part of the movie.
Yeah, it's so funny. And apparently that was the last day that they were shooting with Gandalf, and because it was so momentous, Peter Jackson was like, you know what? Don't do any of your lines, Sir Ian McKellen. Just do something funny. And he
That's
did.
Awesome.
It's the best part of the movie.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, so when I saw Ian McKellen, I mentioned in the last episode when I acted with him, but he talked about how he really he was excited to be doing The Hobbit because he way prefers playing Gandalf the Grey.
Interesting.
Because he's like, Gandalf the White is, very, very regal and proper with everything he says, but Gandalf the Grey's happy to just like sit down and have a beer with the hobbits.
Yeah,
but I did. There's another funny story about that night that I forgot to mention last time. So it started with him, like just basically reciting. It was either like the start of the book, The Hobbit, or Lord of the Rings, or it was like the passage of the book where with the fly you fools thing, and so he just like came and like did it and performed this. It was amazing, and then he would bring someone down, and normally like a little kid, like 12 years old or something like that, and they would be like, "Oh, you know what I've got in my pocket," and would like let them touch the One Ring. On the night, so he did it like over 2 or 3 nights, and on the night I went, he got up some little kid who was real stoked. On the next night, he got up our friend and fan of the podcast, Tyler Brayley, and so apparently on that night, when he was doing his big monologue, he got lost and then had to pull the book out and be like, "Oh, where was I?" and then continue. And then when he was like, "Do you know what I've got in my pocket?" Tyler was like, "More lines."
Very good.
Yeah.
Very shrewd, Tyler. Shout out to you if you're listening.
But so imagine just like being like, "Yeah, I fucking."
You punked Ian McKellen, yeah. Hey, so last on the Lord of the Rings episode, you quizzed me by asking me to tell you the 9 members of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Okay.
Can you tell me all the dwarves in Thorin's company?
So you've got Thorin, the grumpy one. You've got the 2 sexy brothers. You've got the fat, funny one. You've got the silly-looking one. You've got the old one. Mm-hmm. You've got the young one. Mm-hmm. No, so it's like Thorin, Keely, Feely, Owen, Glowin, Bomber. Those are the ones I can remember.
Okay, you got Thorin, Balin, he's baller. That's how I like. That's how I remember him. Balin. Dwalin, Feely, Keely, Dorry, Norrie, Ori, Oin, Gloin, Biffa,
Owen,
Boffer, and Bomber.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, they like 2 of like, or maybe what, like 4 or 5 of them are given distinct personalities.
Yeah. Too many characters, which maybe we'll get to later. But before we do that, Richard, what did you think of these films? Because what was your favourite? Because like we've been pretty salty already leading into this podcast. And if you like The Hobbit, this must be a heartbreaking thing to listen to, but what
but if they like The Hobbit, they won't be listening to this podcast because they don't have good taste.
So what was your favourite of the 3 films?
Okay, definitely Desolation of Smaug, but even that like really fucking drags in some parts. It's just like the last act is quite cool with the actual stuff with Smaug. I remember when I saw because I saw the first two on the cinema and I didn't see the third one until this podcast. When I saw the first two on the cinema, I remember being like, I'm satisfied by those, Yeah. Not being a fan of Lord of the Rings, I was like, yeah, whatever. They're not, I know they're not as good. But whatever, I had a good time. But watching them again, especially An Unexpected Journey, I was like, fuck, man, this film, holy shit. It just goes on and on and on, and it's like the tone is all over the place, and it's just boring, and it's very clearly, especially like actually Battle of the Five Armies, it's very clear that this entire movie was supposed to be the third act of the second movie when it was originally announced as 2.
It's what if you ever hear the phrase rush job and you want a like really good example of where like a layman, like someone who's not even into film that much, can understand what a rush job looks like. The Battle of the Five Armies is the most obvious rush job I've seen. It's up there with True Detective Season 2 in terms of like, there's some ideas here. You really didn't have time to turn them into anything.
Yeah, because I mean, we haven't said it yet, but like this was originally announced as being 2 films, and then it was famously split into 3, and everyone was pissed off about it. But so, do you know when the split point would have been?
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be after the barrel ride.
Yeah. So it was the
where the
barrel
split
scene was
was
supposed
supposed
to be the end of the first one, and then Bard appears, and it's like, who's this mysterious figure? Cut to credits.
Yeah. So rank them 2, 1, 3, right?
2, 1, 3, yeah, easy.
It's obviously 2, 1, 3. So one thing to consider, though, I agree. When I first saw them, I would have said because we'll get to what I thought when I first saw them in a minute. But we watched the extended editions again. Did you? I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And boy, if there's one thing that these films don't need, it's for them to be extended. Like, it is so when I first saw them in the theatre, I would have ranked them, 2, 1, 3. This time round, I actually think I enjoyed 1 the most, and then 2, then 3, because 2 is one of the most hurt by an extended edition films I've ever seen. Like, I was so bored when they're stuck in Mirkwood and Bilbo's just walking around and he looks behind him and sees himself like walking behind him, and I was like, this is going on for so long. It's like an actual fever dream that they live within, but it's not as fun.
But they should have, and I messaged you this while I was watching them, but they literally should have just released the scene of Gollum and Bilbo as a short film, and that should have been all we got of The Hobbit. They'd be like, we've cast Martin Freeman, we're just doing this like one little scene, it's going to be real fun. And then people were like, release the whole thing, and you'd be like, nah. But before you talk about what you thought of them, can I just guess what you thought of, growing up, what you thought of these films?
Okay.
Because I imagine, because you spent so long being like, oi, Lord of the Rings isn't even good. Like, I'm so cool for hating them. Were you like, I'm gonna fall in love with The Hobbit?
I wasn't.
And you were very apologetic and made excuses for them. That's what I
don't think it was. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, I don't think it was an intentional. I don't think I was compensating. I don't think I was making up for lost time. Right. Because by the time I saw The Hobbits, I'd rewatched Lord of the Rings and was at peace with them. Right.
Okay. I didn't mean overcompensating. I meant more that you enjoyed having a contrary opinion about Lord of the Rings, about the Middle Earth.
No, I didn't enjoy it. By this stage, I hated having contrary opinions to people.
Right, okay.
But I did, in fact, really love the first 2 Hobbit movies. When I saw the first one, I was like, that was great. Like, that was fun. I loved this part. And then when I saw the second one, I was like,
so funny.
Well, I remember when I saw the second one, and I remember as well, and the Rotten Tomato score would back this up. I feel like opinions on the second one were actually generally quite positive, where they were kind of dour on the other 2. Like, I feel like the second one in the zeitgeist, everyone was like, it's a step up from the first one.
Yeah.
And I love so much about the second one. I love so much about the whole trilogy. And then the third one came out, and I went to it, and after it finished, my friend who was working at the cinema, he walked in to clean up, and he was like, how was it? And I was like, nah, real bad. I've always thought the third one was just real bad.
The third one is actually garbage.
Yeah, and so I have what is almost the exact opposite experience with the Hobbit movies than I had with Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings, growing up, I was like, I'm too cool for these movies, and when the Hobbit came out, I was like, I like them, and no one else does. So it's very, very jarring to be thrown into this saga and experience these things.
Yeah, I did like the first 2, like I say, but over time I came to understand why they're bad.
And I think especially watching them a week after watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy,
yeah.
We are talking the drop in production value, the drop in just quality control is staggering.
Yeah. Also, did you see see them in the cinema at that higher frame rate they released them in?
Yeah, man.
Fuck, it was bad.
Bad idea. In fact, the higher frame rate and the 4K resolution, I think, is actually responsible for why this movie looks like everything is glistening in CGI because all the sets and things looked too fake at that frame rate, so they had to touch them up.
Yes. Should we explain what we're talking about?
Yeah, so these movies will give your eyes cavities. Like, it is like you're eating sherbet
With your eyes.
6 hours in your eyes. Like, it looks garbage. Like, what's the point?
There's like this shitty Instagram filter over everything as well.
Yeah, and it sucks because it's supposed to be showing off New Zealand landscapes. And what's so cool about Lord of the Rings being set in New Zealand is that it's so gritty and grounded.
Yeah,
and
there was no need to film this in New Zealand.
Yeah, and that's what a tree looks like. That's what a rock looks like in the middle of nowhere, New Zealand. And this, you may as well have not filmed them in New Zealand.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but
so they were. Yeah, they did this thing, and James Cameron started it. He was, I'm going to do this when I release Avatar 2 in 2014. Pete, you can start it off. It was this high frame rate thing. So normally a film would be, normally a film would be like 24 frames per second. These were released at 48 frames per second. And I remember when they first announced it, they described as like, because it was 3D as well, and they said like if 2D's like looking at like a picture of something. 3D is like looking through a window, and 48 frames is like taking away that glass and just being like looking into the real world. And there is definitely, I think, part of that. It gets rid of any motion blur. So when the camera pans really fast from one thing to another, you see every single detail in between that, and it's really disorientating watching something like that when we're so used to experiencing a film in one way. But it just also means that you can see every single detail as clearly as you can in real life. So you can see, there was one shot I remember specifically of like a foot, a hobbit foot, it's like stepping on a stone that was like in the middle of a river, and just being like, fuck, that actually looks like that foot's right there. But that also meant that I could see like where the prosthetic foot became real, and I could see where every hair had been plugged into the silicone, and like it got almost like universally panned as a production decision. I think it could work on something like Avatar when the entire world is made up, but when this is like the real world with stuff stuck onto it and you can see those seams, it did not work at all.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with everything you've said. One thing that we should probably bring up soon is that Lord of the Rings for New Zealand was like, good morning world, we exist. You know, like Lord of the Rings, when that came out, that changed New Zealand culture, as we talked about last fortnight.
And then The Hobbit was like, good night, we don't exist anymore.
Yeah. This film, like, I could talk about the trivial things, like the Air New Zealand safety video that was Hobbit-based was cringy as fuck.
Oh, it is by no means the worst Air New Zealand safety video.
That's true,
though.
but it was
and
still
if you
like...
think it is... You're actually an idiot.
And it was still like, look, we made The Hobbit. And it's like, you don't need to advertise this to New Zealanders. Like, we get tourists from overseas because of The Hobbit. We don't need it to be advertised to us, maybe. But really, the big... And I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't quite understand it completely. And if you probably know about it already, but Lindsay Ellis, who's a YouTuber, video essayist, has a 3-part video series. It's about an hour and a half all up on the detrimental effect that The Hobbit had on New Zealand. And basically what it is that... okay, I'm going to try to summarize, and I apologize if you know way more about this than I do, and I'm getting stuff wrong. But basically, not long after the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Peter Jackson sued New Line, who produced the films, because they were holding out on the money, and it ended up with New Line pulling out of producing The Hobbit entirely, and the rights went to 5 separate studios, all who were wanting different pieces of the pie, and a big part of that was Warner Brothers wanted to move it out of New Zealand, which New Zealand public didn't want, but during this there was also a problem because actors in New Zealand, because we're such a small film industry, weren't getting paid as much as like international actors, and they were trying to form a union, and Warner Brothers were like, no, don't form a union because, you know, evil corporations hate unions. And basically what ended up happening was the Prime Minister had to change the laws of, New Zealand to allow for an attempt to be for everyone to be happy, but in what is kind of like a much less egregious parallel to like the Waitangi Day Treaty signing. It really screwed actors over, and we're still living in a
kind
place
of
like that.
Screwed
now.
over New Zealand to benefit major film studios that want to film here. But the reason for that New Zealand's like a good place to film and stuff like that, not only the landscapes, but it's to do with like tax breaks and stuff like that. It's why a lot of TV shows are filmed in Albuquerque and Georgia as well, so because those states have different tax breaks if you're working on a film, and so it's things to do with that.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to go into it any more than that, other than to say like this is a sad story. Like this is a real tragic, sad.
Yeah, especially if you watch Lindsay Ellis's videos on the topic, I think it's like. So it's 3 parts, and I think only like the third part is actually about the Hobbit laws and how they affected New Zealand. But it's it kind of screwed over the country, and it's very much our Prime Minister John Key at the time bending over backwards to please.
The big people from Warner Bros want to come and talk to me.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, better change the flag.
All right, but probably the most interesting thing about The Hobbit's production schedule, as we said before, was that the trilogy was originally going to be 2 films called The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey and The Hobbit, There and Back Again, and director Guillermo del Toro was attached.
Yeah, and he did pre-production for years.
For
on these.
2.5 years, I think.
Yeah.
Lived in Wellington doing pre-production. He described his vision of the film to have more of a fairy tale vibe, with the second film transitioning into a style tonally consistent with Peter Jackson's original trilogy, which sounds real interesting and like a really cool. I like that he's acknowledging the problem with doing a tonally inconsistent movie.
Yeah.
And so he I imagine the first one would have felt very different to Lord of the Rings, with the second one kind of meeting
bridging the gap.
Bridging the gap, meeting it at the end.
I think Del Toro's one would have been superior in every way.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at, like, this guy spent 2.5 years of pre-production on these films that didn't even get made. And then they were like, oh, Pete, you should film it. And he was like, well, I've publicly said I never want to fucking touch this franchise again. And then, you watch anything behind the scenes and... like, it's literally like on Lord of the Rings, he goes, you watch these, and he gives these rousing speeches, and everyone's having a great time. The Hobbit, he's like, well, here we are again. And then there's a famous behind the scenes clip of when he's like, they're filming one of the scenes with, I think, one part of Gandalf's B plot. I think the set looks like that, and he literally just has to go, everyone take 5. I need to figure out how to shoot this scene, because they're like, they hadn't done pre-production, whereas like every single shot was storyboarded in Lord of the Rings. This he got to set and was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah, Del Toro did pre-production for 2.5 years. Peter Jackson didn't. And apparently Del Toro was let go, or the official story is he left the project because it was taking too long. But if you know about it, it kind of feels like he was asked to leave because I think producers weren't too happy with his vision. Maybe that's to do with the fairy tale stuff. But I'll tell you what, man, the more I learn about Del Toro's vision, the Hobbit duology starts to become like the alternate universe film I most want to see.
Yeah, hard out. Yeah, when we did the films that changed directors podcast, from memory, I think I'd written heaps of notes about Del Toro's The Hobbit, but they were like second on my list, and then I said the first thing, and then got a real good segue into the third one, and then forgot to go back, so we didn't mention it, even though it's like one of the most famous examples. But yeah, doing the research for that, it was real interesting talking about his vision for Smaug as well. Right. Like, he was like, it should look like no other dragon ever put to film, and he'd like done all these. There is like a concept art out there, but he said like the mouth should, like, he spent ages like working on the mouth and was like, it has to be able to speak English, but it shouldn't move like a human mouth, because if it does, that'll completely break the illusion and people will walk out of the cinema. He's like, this is what people like, it has to have its own rules of how his mouth moves so he can speak English. And then Peter Jackson's like, oh, just what if he's got a tongue and, lips and articulates things in the exact same way as a human?
Yeah. It's sad because Jackson actually was still a producer, and it's not like he ripped it away from Del Toro because he wanted it. Like, he wanted Del Toro to direct it. Particularly because
seems like he was forced upon him.
Yeah, Del Toro was the fairy tale answer to Jackson's more grounded approach. So yeah, it's real sad, and you see Del Toro in interviews talk about it, and it's like he's about to cry. He says in one of them, he's like, it's like I've been widowed. He's like, I've only just been able to start talking about it now because he had his heart set on it. He like loved the Hobbit book and like really wanted to do it justice.
Yeah, there's a Wikipedia page of unproduced projects by Guillermo del Toro, and this is clearly the one that he's most upset about, and the one that I think the public's most upset about.
Yeah. Hey, did you know that Daniel Radcliffe, Shia LaBeouf, James McAvoy, Aaron Arkin, and Tobey Maguire were apparently considered for the role of Bilbo Baggins?
Say what?
Yeah. Can you imagine? Like, Daniel Radcliffe is an interesting choice because it's like...
You clearly just want the mirror image of Elijah Wood.
Yeah, and also, like, that's actually a good point, but it's like, imagine if Harry Potter and Bilbo Baggins were played by the same guy.
Right, yeah.
I don't when an actor has two significant roles that are like iconic in pop culture already.
What about Harrison Ford?
Yeah, but they were made for their original inception was in movies, Indiana Jones and Han Solo.
So you don't like. What about like
Ian McKellen with Gandalf,
Star-Lord, and Owen Grady?
Yeah, I actually do have kind of a problem with that because they're very similar characters. I'd say the exception to this rule be Ian McKellen, who plays Gandalf and Magneto. I don't have too much of a problem with that, but I don't know. Anyway, Shia LaBeouf. That's a rare. I don't think that would have been very good.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those things where they say, "Oh, they were like talked about." Like, I don't think he would have ever seriously been in contention for it.
James McAvoy seems too old. Yeah, he's probably the same age as Martin Freeman, but I don't know. I can't see.
Yeah, I don't know why you'd say. I imagine him being younger than Martin Freeman.
Right. Fair enough. I don't know.
When I think of James McAvoy, I think, you know what? He's probably younger than Martin Freeman. That's the first thing that pops to my mind.
That's amazing. Not any of his work or like his
no.
films. I don't know who Aaron Arkin is.
Yeah.
But Tobey Maguire. Can you fucking imagine? Can you imagine Tobey Maguire as Bilbo Baggins? That would have been hilarious. Not that I think he's necessarily a bad actor, but I think he can only play a certain type of character.
Yeah.
I'm ready to be impressed, Maguire.
James McAvoy is 8 years younger than Martin Freeman.
There you go. Peter Jackson.
What a strange thing to say. James McAvoy's too old, but Martin Freeman's the right age.
Well, maybe I don't like Martin Freeman as Bilbo. I haven't said that yet.
Okay, no,
I love Martin Freeman as Bilbo, and so did Peter Jackson. He said that his first choice was always Martin Freeman, but he was initially unable to accept the role due to scheduling conflicts with Sherlock.
Yeah, I remember him turning it down and everyone being like, no!
So Jackson reworked the entire shooting schedule for the trilogy to accommodate him, which may be the only pre-production work Jackson did for the entire trilogy.
Yeah, he's like, oh, yeah, we'll delay filming by 6 months. And everyone's like, oh, cool, we can do storyboards, we can like actually make props. Pete's like, no, we're just waiting for Martin.
Yeah. So I want to talk about how The Hobbit works as a prequel, because I think The Hobbit is responsible for a lot of tropes that we now recognize as being bad in a prequel. I
mean, like more than the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah, no, the Star Wars prequels, I guess. Yeah, we'll get to that. So I feel like the Hobbit trilogy fails as prequels because they're based on a book, as I said at the start, they're based on a book that was written first. So when you're reading the Hobbit novel, you theoretically don't know that Bilbo and Gandalf and a few other characters survive, right? Like their fates for the sake of dramatic tension, they are technically up in the air. But the movies like insist on putting specifically those two characters in so many life-threatening situations, and they do with Legolas as well. And it's like, what is the tension here? Like a Gandalf's whole appendices inspired side quest, it leads him to discovering things the audience literally already knows. You know?
Yeah.
So the storytelling falls more on showing how Gandalf came to discover that Sauron is coming back instead of revealing anything to the audience, because we know Sauron's coming back. You know?
Yeah.
So it's like, you want to know how Gandalf found out? And it's like, okay, but I already know the dramatic tension should be him finding out, you know, us finding out at the same time. A few other...
But how do you shield that from... Like, you have to watch Lord of the Rings without realizing that Sauron's back.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point, right? That's why that's a problem. I'm not offering a solution. I'm just saying it's a problem. A few other moments of like prequel sinning that you get a lot in prequels, and is one of the main reasons people don't like prequels, is things like referencing the origin of something.
Chubby ha moments.
So, you know, Solo was full of these, like why he calls Chewbacca Chewie, or how he got his blaster, and things that is like, I wasn't even looking for the origin of this story. So there's a Gimli mention, which is done as a joke, where Legolas sees a photo of young Gimli and he's like, who's this hideous creature? And Gimli's dad, who's one of the main dwarves, is like, that's me wee lad, Gimli! And that's a real good impression. I want to praise myself.
I'm supposed to say that, not you, okay.
But I think that moment is outshadowed by the Aragorn mention, which is taken very seriously. But again, it's just constructed in a way that implies you're supposed to watch The Hobbit first, so you can find out who the mysterious Strider is when you watch the next film.
It's funny as well, because Legolas is, you know, in this, but famously not in the Hobbit book.
Yeah.
And Viggo Mortensen was offered a role, I remember, and he was just like, Aragorn's not in the book.
How would you even put... He's... In the timeline of the films, he's 20. In the timeline of the books, he's 10.
Yeah. But that's like, I love that he has that kind of...
Yeah.
Because also I think he kind of hates Lord of the Rings, or like, you know, is over franchise films now.
Yeah. Yeah, because so basically at the end of the Battle of the Five Armies, Thranduil, who's Legolas's dad, is like, you have to go find a Strider, and he's like, he calls him Strider. His true name you'll have to discover for yourself. It's like, are you doing a cliffhanger? What do you mean? What is the point of that? That's so stupid. We know you're talking about Aragorn. Like, it's not ambiguous because he calls himself Strider. So it's just like, just cut the scene. Just don't go. You'll have to find his true name for yourself. It's like, ooh, I wonder what it's gonna be. I thought, though, the worst example of this prequeling signposting would be the origin of Sting's name, Bilbo's sword. It's less important, but it's so cringy because Bilbo has a sword named Sting, which he gives to Frodo in Lord of the Rings, and we know it's called Sting, and it glows blue when elves are near, and you see him in an unexpected journey find the sword, and that's fine. I'm not saying that part's egregious. But then in Desolation of Smaug, when he's fighting spiders with the sword, he stabs one of them, and the spider goes, it stings! And he's like, Sting. And it's like, that could be enough, you know?
Yeah.
But then he goes, it's a good name. And you're like, yeah, it's a good name, Bilbo. And he goes, Sting. And it's like, I get it. It's like, they do it 3 times. They let me know 3 times that this is why it's called Sting. Because it stings when you get stabbed with it, unlike any other sword which doesn't sting when you get stabbed with it. I don't know.
You said it glows when there's elves nearby. That's incorrect. Yeah.
Oh my god. Stops recording.
Yeah, it glows when orcs or goblins are nearby.
There you go. Yeah, goblins.
Goblets.
Yeah.
There's people having a drink around here.
Do you have any thoughts on like this kind of prequel-y stuff and what it could have done better?
They can be done right. I think. Like, I think the Strider one, I think, isn't necessarily as bad as you're making it out to be.
Really?
Because it is more like, I I think it's very much a bridge gapping kind of thing. Whereas like Sting is like just idiotic.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. So beyond the prequel problems, I do think there are certain structural problems. Preaky probs. There are certain structure probs that plague the trilogy, and in a lot of ways I think the films would have been improved by making a few dramatic fundamental changes from the book, which, like, if we're talking about making The Hobbit into 3 films, that's the point of view I'm coming from. Like, yeah, 2 films would have obviously been better, but if we have to make 3 films, I think you need to change some things in the book. The main thing I would say is Smaug has to survive at least to the halfway mark of the 3rd movie. You know, like, to kill him, to the namesake of the 2nd film, it starts with him, it ends with him, like, getting to Lake Town, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? To start the 3rd film and kill off what has been 2 films of Big Boss, you know, before the opening titles, is such a obviously bad decision.
Such a Strucky prob.
It's such a Strucky prob. And I don't know how, but you got to make him survive longer, man. Maybe he's part of the battle. I don't know.
Well, just shift the timing of the film. So get rid of the Battle of the Five Moes. You don't need it. And then have them entering the Lonely Mountain be the start of the 3rd film.
Wow.
And then so the battle with Smaug and then him dying is like the end of the 2nd act.
Yeah. Do you know the Battle of the 5 Armies in the book takes up a chapter and a half? No, half a chapter or something like that.
Yeah, I did know. Yeah,
that's insane. And it's like, but the appendices, and it's like, well, I don't know if they were much longer either.
Yeah, there's like full like scenes and you know, like halves of a movie devoted to like a sentence worth of content and stuff.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's not like that's without precedent, because, you know, we talked about how, like, Arwen was based on a sentence in the appendices of Lord of the Rings and stuff.
Yeah, but it's fine when it's a good change.
Yeah. That's the problem, Peter Jackson. You needed to make good changes instead of bad ones.
Yeah.
I made a cult popcorn video on this ages ago, and I thought I'd mention it as well. One of my biggest problems with the structure of the Battle of the 5 Armies is that every other Lord of the Rings movie and Hobbit movie is like, they start in one place and by the end of the film they're in a different place. You know, it's a quest.
Yeah.
These are the definition of quests. They're road movies. And this one is just stuck. Everyone just sits still. We don't move anywhere. We get it. We get like Legolas goes on like some approximation of a quest at one point, but it's not enough. And again, beyond just making them 2 movies and not 3, I don't know how to fix this, but like, it is a bummer to have the format of the past 5 movies be thrown out the window for this one.
Yeah. Like, it is interesting watching them, and it's very clearly you could make 2 half-decent films out of it.
Exactly, because I'm more so than the Star Wars prequels, which, again, we're going to talk about soon. I think that The Hobbit is 100% salvageable. I know there are fan edits out there, and I haven't watched any of them, but I might actually after watching these.
Like Topher Grace edited them down to 1 film recently to deal with how stressful it was playing David Duke. That's how there was like his stress ball was editing The Hobbit.
And it's because, so what I guess what I'm saying is, if you took all 3 movies, you could cut out enough to make 1 to 2, I'm going to say, good movies. You know, I'm not even like the best we could do. Like, they would be good, great movies. Like,
1 like decent 3-hour movie probably, or like 2 pretty decent like 2-hour movies. Yeah.
Like, and because the problem with the Star Wars prequels is that a lot of it is rotten at the core, right? So the problems with it are like the almost 100% of the problem with the final products of the Hobbit movies is that there's too much in them.
Yeah, and I think also as well that like adapting, and I think this is what Del Toro would have been doing, is that The Hobbit is a children's book, whereas The Lord of the Rings are like these big epics. And so I think adapting it as a kids movie, you know, trim them down quite a lot, and not like a kids movie, but more like maybe just slightly less adult oriented than Lord of the Rings, you know, have a bit more of the fun and whimsy in there, and keep them, you know, around 2 hours, but instead change them in these, gigantic epics that, are what, like 40 hours each.
Yeah. As I said, Del Toro's version is one of the biggest tragedies in Hollywood,
Well, not even just in Hollywood, and the world.
Like, I think the only other movie that exists in an alternate universe I'd really want to see would be The Dark Knight Rises if Heath Ledger didn't die. But even that's not confirmed. Like, this is the most information we have about what these movies would have looked like. Another fundamental change I think would have helped is I think there are too many dwarves. And because it's just, like, with the Fellowship, it's like they're all distinct characters.
Yeah, and they split them up as well, and then you have time to develop each of them.
I think there are too many. I think you could take out maybe like 3 to 4 of the dwarf characters, because then it's just like the company of 9 dwarves, and no one, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's a fun illustration in a kid's book, but it doesn't work well in a movie.
Yeah, and I also think they should have made some of the dwarves female. And then we don't have to
you
put...
fucking SJW cuck.
Then we don't have to put Toriel in the films and the shitty
can we talk about
Toriel
for a bit?
Yeah.
So this character was written for Evangeline Lilly, who had retired from acting, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, and Peter Jackson was like, "Oh, I've written you this part. It's amazing." She's like, "I'll do it as long as I'm not part of a love triangle."
Yeah.
And which her character exists only to be in a love triangle, and so I do feel bad for her, because she filmed this part and they're like, yeah, this badass chick, like she's such a great female character, and then they were like, oh, we're doing reshoots to pad it out for 3 films and we're going to give you this interspecies love story, and man, it's bad. I do want to mention though, there was like one of the funniest like cinema going experiences for me was Desolation of Smaug. So Keeley, who's the sexy dwarf, who doesn't look like a dwarf at all, he doesn't have any ridiculous makeup, he's just like kind of a hot dude, but he's short, like you, AJ.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah. So
I imagine that's what a lot of girls who have considered dating me but have decided not to, that's what they've said about me. He's kind of a hot dude, but he's short.
So he's been wounded, and he needs this like weed rubbed on him, and Toriel does it, and oh my god, it's the most fucking ridiculous scene ever put to film. So she's like rubbing his leg, but the way it's filmed, it either looks like she's giving him a hand job, or or she's riding him, and it's shot from the side.
Yeah.
And then she starts speaking in Elvish to him, and it's in slow motion, and this light comes from behind her, and it's like the most ridiculous thing. But so she's like slowly like rubbing off screen, and he's looking up at her like,
it's like the scene from Scary Movie 2 where Anna Faris jacks off the good dude from Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah, but so this is happening, and he's like, they're making eye contact, and she's like, and he's like, and then the person behind me was like, he's gonna come. It was so funny, like, because it was slightly louder than a whisper, but it was like so matter of factly, like, he's gonna come, like the way you'd say, like, when someone's like, oh boy, I can't wait to retire tomorrow, you'd be like, oh, he's gonna die.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Toriel, it's amazing that the love triangle between her and Keeley and Legolas was a reshoot decision, because I can't imagine her role would have been anything interesting, and or at least like what would she have done if that wasn't?
Well, I think she would have just been the female Legolas who's there to shoot a bow and arrow, and then that, constitutes being a strong female character, the only one in the trilogy. Well, because maybe, hey, she does things that a man normally does, and that's her entire character.
Maybe her and Legolas should have just been combined into one character, and it's just her. Because then you're
then you get rid of the problem of Uncanny Valley Orlando Bloom.
Yeah, and also the fact that he wasn't in the book, and that pissed off so many people. So make some of the dwarves females. I know why they didn't do it in 2012, but now it's like anyone who gets angry at this is such a loser. Like, who gives a shit?
Like, making the dwarves female or not having female dwarves?
Maybe 2 or 3 of the dwarves females, right?
Yeah, because it made it sound like you were like, anyone who gets angry at all the dwarves being male is a fucking idiot.
Because they mention that you never see a dwarf female in the flesh.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
You see, they mention them in, I think, the Two Towers, and Gimli's like, the problem is that a lot of dwarf females are mistaken for men. And Aragorn's it's because of the beards. And it's like, shit, okay, show me them. I don't care. Like, whatever, have bearded women be.
Or maybe some of them were women then.
Yeah, true, maybe.
And you mistook them for men.
Well,
if J.K. Rowling had made The Hobbit, she'd come out and be like,
Thorin's a woman.
Yeah.
All right, now it's time, Richard, for some randomly placed useless trivia / statistics.
But that sounds like you've strategically placed it.
Yeah, I was going to say, a fun fact about the randomly placed aspect of this segment is that it's now actually very intentionally placed in a way that bridges the gap between 2 talking notes. All right, so if you've never heard this segment before, this is where we talk about our own podcast and where this fits into the lore of it. So feel free to skip ahead 5 minutes if you don't give a shit about that.
It's going to be 5 minutes long.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes long, Richard.
Jesus.
I've timed it. Do not interrupt me, because then it'll just be longer. No, I don't know how long it'll take. Okay, so the 3 films in this trilogy... But please don't interrupt me. The 3 films in this trilogy make up our 11th, 12th, and 13th prequels that we've covered on the show. So the others being Puss in Boots, the 3 X-Men prequels, and Origins Wolverine, Monsters University, Dumb and Dumberer When Harry Met Lloyd, the 2 Santa Paws movies, and spoilers, Final Destination 5. I didn't include the final...
Someone that's really worried about spoilers and is like, what franchise is going to be?
I didn't include the 3 Beethoven films in this list because they're the 3 final ones, because they're more of like a meta reboot.
Yeah, and then by no means a prequel, and no one would define them as such.
Yeah, but they make the first Beethoven movie in it, right?
Yeah, no, that's idiotic. You didn't bring that up.
I agree. I am an idiot. But I'm hot.
But you're kind of hot, but you are short.
I also didn't include Freddy vs. Jason, even though it happens before Jason X, because that feels like it's not really a prequel. Nor did I include every Hellraiser film after the 4th one, which again is like set. The 4th one's set in the future. I don't know if I'd call the other ones prequels. Yeah. It's more like Jason X and Hellraiser 4. I forget what it's called. Bloodlines.
Yeah, Bloodline.
I feel like it's more that those are a special kind of sequel.
They jump ahead massively here.
Like the opposite of a prequel.
Sequel.
Yeah, so this is our second prequel trilogy to have at least one film featuring Ian McKellen after the X-Men prequels, and technically our second prequel trilogy to be a prequel to a trilogy where every film stars Ian McKellen, which is also X-Men. And last one for now, if you count The Lord of the Rings as a separate franchise to The Hobbit, then this is our 5th franchise to feature elves. The other ones being Santa Paws, Dungeons and Dragons, Beethoven, and Shrek.
Yeah.
The 2 Middle-earth franchises tip the scale to our podcast being fantasy elf heavy over Christmas elves, though if you count Shrek the Halls, which is a short film set in the Shrek universe, this may change, but I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen Shrek the Halls.
Yeah. This is also our second franchise where, if you count Lord of the Rings as a separate franchise, where we've both separately met a star of it.
Very true.
And for me, it's a different star from the last time.
I forgot how much Brett McKenzie was in was in the first Hobbit movie, man.
But yeah, my star, the person I've met, is also in this franchise quite a bit, because I have had quite a nice chat with Martin Freeman.
Tell us the story.
Well, it's more of a story for another franchise, but I won tickets to go to the world premiere of The World's End, which was held in Wellington, New Zealand. And I'll tell the long version of that story when we finally get the Cornetto trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I met him and had a chat to him, and he was really drunk. and he was like, "Hello, my name is Martin," and I was like, "Yeah, I know." And then, yeah, what was he saying? Because he was there, because basically like everyone from The Hobbit went to this. So like Benedict Cumberbatch was there, Richard Armitage was there, who I like kind of walked past and didn't realize it was Richard Armitage. But yeah, so I've sat in a room with like most of the stars of The Hobbit, and I've met Ian McKellen and Martin Freeman.
And here you are, just singing their good graces for an hour and a half.
But yeah, no, Martin Freeman was a cool dude. I asked him when Sherlock was coming back.
What did he say?
He said that they were filming it or something like that, or they were just about to start filming it. And then ever since then, I've been like, why the fuck did I waste time asking him about that? But I think we did chat for a little bit. I mostly spoke to Simon Pegg. We had a good chat.
Nice. Well, he wasn't in this.
Yeah,
this
but look
series,
forward to hearing that story again, the non-abridged version.
Yeah. All right. Richard, we're going to move on to a new weekly, fortnightly, maybe weekly segment that I'm going to try do for every episode. But I discovered the first time it's actually quite hard. So this segment is one we talked about on the Lord of the Rings episode. It's called #AskEveryone2019. So what this segment is based on how much we enjoyed talking to Chris Weitz, who co-directed American Pie and directed New Moon and a bunch of other franchise films that we've covered.
And David McKeevans.
Yeah, David McKeevans.
He did
as
direct
well.
David McKeevans. We also enjoyed talking to him.
Yeah. I'm going to, on air, on an episode, maybe every off week as well, I haven't decided yet, I'm going to tweet someone from the franchise that we're covering and ask them if they'd be keen to be interviewed on the show.
Yeah. So now there's an art to tweeting random people, isn't there?
Yeah. And part of that art is if you announce that you're doing it on a podcast, it becomes way less lame because people know you're doing it for like a funny reason.
Like there's a certain level of person that you want to tweet, right?
Right. Yeah, it's like not famous but a good career.
Yeah. You want people that are famous enough that it's cool, but not famous enough that they'll reply.
Yeah. So for the whole week, I was like, I'll just tweet Brett McKenzie and attach the photos of me and him and be like, would you be keen to come and talk about your experience on The Hobbit? I think I found his Twitter. He hasn't tweeted since 2010. And that's as official as I could find, was this very lonesome Twitter account. So I'm not going to tweet him instead, and I spent about 45 minutes just scouring through the Hobbit crew members looking for someone who'd be good to tweet. So this is who we're going to tweet today for Ask Everyone 2019, Richard. We're going to tweet a person called Walter Casotto. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And he is a makeup artist who worked on he was the senior prosthetic makeup artist on An Unexpected Journey. He was also a prosthetic makeup artist on X-Men First Class. X First Class. What the hell is that? Is that the same thing as X-Men First? Yeah, it is. Okay. It's called X First Class on IMDb for some reason. That's weird. Did you know that?
It's weird. Let me look it up.
So he's prosthetic makeup artist for X First Class, as well as a special makeup effects artist for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, which we haven't watched.
It's stylized on screen as X First Class.
Right. And what also makes him pertinent to this podcast, he was also a prosthetic makeup artist on Bohemian Rhapsody, which, say what you want about the film, the prosthetic effects are pretty good, in that. Yeah. So I found his Twitter and I'm going to tweet him right now. What should I say? Hey, V. Casotto, we run a podcast where we review a lot of different films that you've worked on. We would love to interview you on our show. Would you be potentially interested?
Yeah.
And now we're going to tweet him. The tweet is sent. The tweet is posted. I apologize. And if you want to get involved, guys, retweet that tweet or tweet him yourself if you want, and say, yeah, you should do it. So maybe we'll hear from him at some point. All right. Cool. So that was our new segment. I hope you enjoyed it. I was thinking if we do it in off-week episodes, we could do it like right at the end of an episode and we'd go back to like Lethal Weapon and work our way up through all the franchises we've covered that we haven't tweeted people from. Cool.
Nice.
All right, Richard, let's talk about the Hobbit trilogy versus the Star Wars prequel trilogy. and which one's worse. So both are famous for being like prequel trilogy, which is a very specific thing, but prequel trilogies that kind of ruined the legacy of a mostly unanimously loved trilogy before.
Nerdy
it, right?
pop culture thing, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you which one you think's worse, but I want to say what I think first.
Sure.
So if we're just using like a scientific point system, like it loses a point for doing this, it gains a point for doing this.
Sure.
Personally, I'd say The Hobbit is easily the better trilogy. Like,
The Hobbit,
I think the only thing I'm willing to admit the Star Wars prequels have over The Hobbit is that they're shorter and you don't have to suffer through as much tedium. But as I said before, I feel like the Star Wars prequels are rotten at the core, whereas the Hobbit trilogy has prestigious moments. It has, moments in it that are up there with some of the best moments in Lord of the Rings. They're just surrounded by tedious.
Yeah, I think
things.
that. I don't think that's really an argument.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you think so because
like you said, they're rotten to the core, whereas there are good movies hidden inside The Hobbit.
Yeah, I remember seeing a Reddit thread that was like, "It's time we admit that the Hobbit trilogy is worse than the Star Wars prequel trilogy," and I was like, "In what world are they worse?" Like, I would go as far as to say the Hobbit trilogy is like much better than the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah,
but I really don't like the Star Wars prequels, so maybe that's just me. All that being said, while I feel like the Star Wars prequels ruin the story legacy of the originals, the Hobbit trilogy is probably more detrimental to like its prestige legacy of the Middle-earth films.
Yeah.
Because The Lord of the Rings are probably by and large seen as being more prestigious than Star Wars.
Yeah, but they won Best Picture, so.
Yeah, exactly. And so in a way, this is ruining the trilogy in a real world sense, whereas the Star Wars prequels ruined it in a fictional sense. Yeah. So any more thoughts on that, or was that the whole thing?
No, I mean that's it.
Oh, I'm glad you agree. I was worried you'd be like, oh no, the Hobbits are real bad, and I'd be like, yeah, but it's like they're different ball games, man.
Yeah.
All right. So I thought, before we're kind of spiraling down into our final few segments here.
Oh god.
So we are coming to the last, 2 hours of the podcast. So
do you know what's fun as well? That we've just tweeted a makeup artist.
Yeah.
Who are they nominated for an Oscar for Bohemian Rhapsody?
I'm not sure.
Well, anyway, because the Oscars not announcing stuff during the break. 42 seconds ago, the Academy tweeted that they were reversing that decision.
Hooray! Wow, you heard it here first on a podcast that's coming out 3 days after we've recorded it.
Yeah. Because I've pulled up Twitter to see our tweet.
Wow.
And the Academy.
You know what, Richard? The news doesn't stop.
It doesn't.
No. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about before we just descend into rattling off our usual segments is, are the Hobbit films worse than the Lord of the Rings films are good?
What? No.
I agree. I think the Lord of the Rings films are better than the Hobbit trilogy is bad, is another way to put it.
Yeah. Like if you were putting them on a scale of good to bad, it would still tip in favor of good.
Yeah, and I'm saying that now so that when we eventually do, rank these franchises, which we want to do middle of this year, that's an important thing to consider. It does pull it down somewhere in the ranking, but not.
Yeah, but we have done these as two franchises.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe we should rank them separately. I don't know. I think that and the IP in general is the franchise, and they're important to cover in separate episodes, but they do.
All right, we'll cross this bridge when we come to it.
Sure. So I wanted to just rattle off a few things that I really like about the Hobbit trilogy, because we've spent so much time shitting on them, but I love some of the stuff in this series. I love some of the stuff in the series more than I love some of the stuff in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, right?
Right, okay.
So first and foremost, Martin Freeman is excellent as Bilbo.
Yeah.
I think it may be my favourite performance of Martin Freeman's. Yeah. It's up there with Lester from Fargo, but I think Bilbo is a way more nuanced and beautiful performance. I consider him to be one of my favorite actors as well, and this is like him at his peak. I think there's a few scenes that I really like that I thought, and you feel free to jump in with some things you like as well. I really like in the second film when he like kills the spider and picks up the ring that fell out of his pocket, and then he just
and he says, "Oh, sting! I like that."
No. He picks up the ring and then he puts his hand over his face and he looks at the ring and sort of like he doesn't say any words, but it's clear the message being communicated is, what is this ring doing to me?
Yeah,
and it's communicated all through emotion. I really love that. I love his conversation with Smaug. I love one thing probably the one thing I like the most. Two really good scenes or good moments in the Battle of the Five Armies is when Thranduil calls him out. And he's like, "Aren't you the guy who stole all our barrels?" And he goes, "Yes." It's like one of the only moments of like levity and like creative acting in the whole film. And the other part is when Thorin dies and he's crouched next to Thorin and his head is in his hands and he goes, and that's immediately followed by Toriel holding a dead Keely going, "Why does it hurt so much?" And it's like the other one was the like more emotive, like that's the one you should have ended on.
Yeah. Fuck, man, that horrible scene that is, eh?
So yeah, I really love. I think I love Martin Freeman's delivery of a lot of the lines. One of the reasons I liked the Desolation of Smaug so much is the way how it ends with him watching Smaug fly into Lake Town, and he goes, "What have we done?" And I love that delivery so fucking much, dude. I think it's such a cool.
Yeah, it is great delivery. One of my favorite. It was on all the trailers, but when he's got the One Ring, and he's like, "Oh, I found something in there," and Gandalf's like, "What did you find?" And he's like, "My courage."
Yeah.
And it's like he's got a lump in his throat, and then it's like such a great delivery, and then Ian McKellen responds with like, "Good, you'll need it." And it's such a strange delivery of the line. Like you watch what his mouth is doing as he says that, and it's like, what a choice.
Yeah. Well, similarly, besides that, I do think Ian McKellen kills it as Gandalf as well.
Yeah. And it's like I love that. I way prefer Gandalf the Grey, and I love that he prefers Gandalf the Grey as well.
Yeah, sure. And of course, Benedict Cumberbatch as Smaug is awesome as well. As I said, the scene with him and Bilbo is really, really cool, and I think Benedict Cumberbatch fills the hole that not having Gollum in the film. You know what I mean? Like, or at least Smaug does.
Yeah.
And I think
because he's also did the mocap for it as well.
Yeah. And I think that's what's wrong with Battle of the Five Armies, as I said before, is they don't have, like, the first one's got the Gollum scene, the second one's got the Smaug scene, and the third one doesn't really have anything. And combined, I would say Martin Freeman, Ian McKellen, and Benedict Cumberbatch as Smaug, and I guess Andy Serkis as Gollum by virtue of him always being Gollum, are the like four main reasons I'm not gonna just be like, Guillermo del Toro should just make a Hobbit movie. You know, these are the gold in them their hills.
Like by all accounts, Martin Freeman's such a perfect choice. So who's to say Del Toro wouldn't have cast him?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think of at the end of Desolation of Smaug when he's flying towards Lake Town and he's like, "I am fire, I am death."
I think they ended it on the better line, which was
it's such a strange thing because it's like I want to like it, but I don't quite.
Right.
Like it feels like it should be this iconic moment, and maybe if it was in a better film, it would be. But yeah.
The What Have We Done from Martin Freeman
it's so
it was the main reason I was happy that they were split into three films when I was watching them.
Yeah.
Because I was like, otherwise you wouldn't end with this like amazing delivery and amazing little cliffhanger.
Yeah. Although I do want to say the What Have We Done, and so it might be my favorite. This might be my favorite part of The Hobbit is I See Fire by Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, I've got that written down as well. Yeah.
Because like, fuck, that's a good song. Like, I do quite like Ed Sheeran, Cards on the Table, but that's like probably my favorite song by him.
Yeah.
But I don't think it works super well going from What Have We Done? Cut, directed by Peter Jackson. Oh, Misty Eye. Yeah, and I don't know if that fully works. And I remember seeing it in the cinema, and because that song was huge by the time the film came out, and just being like, yeah. Because I remember thinking, this is a weird end credit song. I was like, oh, they'll have a score and then go into that like they often do. And no, just straight into that, and I was like, okay, probably wouldn't have made that choice.
Do you know, I'd never heard the song until the credits of
Oh, really?
Desolation Smell, because I don't really have that problem with it, because that was the first time I heard it. So a few more things that I really like in the trilogy. Gollum in An Unexpected Journey looks amazing.
Yeah.
And
I felt so sorry for him.
Yeah.
Like, he's not doing anything wrong. Like, he's a little bit, like, you know, he's a little bit ADHD.
Yeah.
But he's like, you know, just kind of jumping around, like playing with corpses and stuff like that. And then, you know, Bilbo comes into his home and he's like, oh, I'm going to eat you. And then Bilbo's like, nah. And then he just takes this ring and he's so sad. And it's like amazing acting by Andy Serkis and amazing work by Weta. But, oh my God, I felt so sorry for him when Bilbo takes the ring. Yeah. And he's like, there's this one shot where Bilbo's wearing the ring so he's invisible and he's like right in Gollum's face. And Gollum's like just looking for him. And he looks so sad.
Yeah, it's excellent. That's what I'm saying. Like that conflict is so pertinent to the wider story of the Middle Earth saga, right? Because that's like that scene in the cave. I think is so good because it's actually like a huge turning point. Like it's the linchpin which the rest of the series moves off. Because if Bilbo hadn't stolen the ring, Sauron would have got it sooner because they found Gollum. You know. Well, I think they found Gollum. Yeah, ended up being like Shire Baggins. So, like, you know, yeah. And I think that there is an obvious reason for this. So I'm not saying this like I'm like this genius or anything. But Gollum is also the most tasteful cameo of a Lord of the Rings character.
Is that scene in The Hobbit?
Huh?
And is that scene in the book?
Yeah, of course. So that's what I'm saying. That's why it's obvious because it's based in the book itself. I wouldn't call Bilbo or Gandalf cameos because it's like they're the sake of the story of why. What
about like Ian Holm Bilbo or Frodo?
Yeah, I think that's distasteful doing Frodo and old Bilbo. I think that doesn't work at all.
I think old Bilbo kind of works.
But Frodo's pretty like...
Yeah, Frodo's pretty like...
We got them back, everybody!
But because I think it works as a nice bookend having Ian Holm, actually, because it's the book we've already seen, which I guess is why it works as a prequel, because, you're actually only really flashing back to, like, the start of Fellowship of the Ring, and then you're reading the book he's written.
I think Ian Holm maybe should have narrated it. I don't know if he should have appeared on screen. I think I would have been like, with that.
Oh, and then we went to
like
cave.
Open and close the first and
like
last
Galadriel and
in
the originals.
Yeah, and I'd call Legolas a cameo simply because he's not in the book, even though he's got a very beefed up role, and like that's horrible. And the Gimli cameo is horrible, and like so Gollum is a really good case for how to do. I feel dumb saying it because it's in the book, and the book isn't a prequel, but it is a really good way to do that kind of fan servicey prequel trope of because he's so relevant to that story. The other thing I really like is the Misty Mountain song from the first film is so good when they sing it and they're like over the misty mountain.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's
I
like,
hate that bit.
You hate it?
Yeah.
I love it. I love that song.
It's stupid.
I think it creates such an awesome atmosphere, and it also they then turned it into the score for the film, right? So whenever there's action, it's like dun 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 dun, dun, which gives the film its own identity. Because I think score is a big part of differentiating a film from its sequel or whatever, and so it makes it feel separate from Lord of the Rings. And then I don't think they even play it by the time the third film comes around. And it's like, no, that's like when I think of. This is my main problem with the Battle of the Five Armies. When I think of An Unexpected Journey, I think of the atmosphere of the time that film was out, and big part of that is the Misty Mountain song. And when I think of the Desolation of Smaug, I think of Icy Fire. Like, again, I didn't hear it till but after I saw the movie, that song was everywhere, and so by virtue of association,
like they were holding it back until you had seen the movie.
Yeah. By virtue of association, Desolation of Smaug was everywhere and was this huge thing. And then in Battle of the Five Armies, it's that Billy Boyd song that didn't stick in the public consciousness at all.
And it's like at the end of the credits as well.
Yeah,
because I remember when that first came out, I was like, I'll have a listen to it, and I didn't even finish the video. I was like, oh, okay, I'm bored of this. And then I was like, when we decided we're doing The Hobbit, I was like, oh, I should go listen to that Billy Boyd song, because, like I said, Edge of Night is like my favourite scene from the original Tridge. And then, again, I didn't make it through the video. I was just like, oh yeah, no, that's right, I don't remember this.
And the last thing I've got for things I really like is, Icy Fire by Ed Sheeran might be the best thing to come out of the entire trilogy. Cool. Okay, now we're going to move on to dumb IMDb trivia, Richard.
Yay!
So this, I scoured the IMDb. I spent about 2 hours reading IMDb trivia for the Hobbit films. Do you know how many times I saw the sentence, "This was Christopher Lee's final appearance in film," or like, something akin to that? They repeat the same shit over and over again, and it's like, I know it's based on a book. I know that some of it's taken from the appendices. Stop telling me this shit.
It is interesting though, like, Christopher Lee in these films does look like someone who is about to die.
Yeah.
Like, he looks very sick and very sickly. But I mean, good on him. He was a real fucking rock and roll dude. Christopher Lee.
I agree.
Good on him.
So here I've got quite a few, but 3 of them are like connected. So the first piece of dumb IMDb trivia I've got here, because IMDb trivia is user submitted, right? So anyone can edit, and it's doesn't have to be good. All right. During Bard's speech to the people of Lake Town, after they reach dry land, the fourth wall of cinema is broken by a Siberian husky as it looks at the camera during a widescreen shot, though it is highly unlikely the husky's gaze was intentional. We may never know the secrets that rattle on inside a Siberian husky's
ask
mind.
Peter.
I like how it's highly unlikely that the husky's gaze. It's not like, obviously the husky's gaze probably wasn't intentional. Yeah. It's highly unlikely. It implies that we can find out.
Yeah. But I love the like, because I imagine if you asked Peter Jackson, like, about any frame of Lord of the Rings, he'd be able to be like, oh yeah, like, and, get real deep into it. Whereas like, when the husky looks at the camera, was that intentional? About what the fuck are you talking about?
I have no idea what you mean.
I don't care.
So this next, I'm going to read out 3 in a row. Okay, so by itself they're not going to sound dumb, but
okay, I will not interrupt you.
3 in a row. Okay, number 1. The final this is for Battle of the Five Armies. The final movie of the cinematic Middle-earth franchise that began with Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring in 2001. Number 2. This is the 6th movie taking place in Middle-earth to be directed by Peter Jackson. It is also set 3rd in terms of franchise chronology. Number 3. This is the last movie in the Hobbit trilogy, and also the final movie in the Middle-earth film franchise. They're in a row. I fucking know. I know. It's right at the bottom, and after reading 2 hours worth of IMDb trivia and getting to that,
if you
it's
don't
like,
fucking know that.
I am in hell. This is purgatory. It's just reading the same sentence worded slightly differently each time, over and over again. All right, and the last thing I wrote down was for dumb IMDb trivia. This is a great little piece of dumb IMDb trivia, Richard.
Oh, beautiful.
As spoilers for Battle of the Five Armies, not that we haven't spoiled it already, but as Fili dies before Keely in the movie, Keely becomes the Crown Prince of Erebor for a little while until his own death later on. Imagine bringing that up at the funeral. Like, you're all standing around their bodies, and you're like looking at Keely, and you like, lean over to the dwarf next to you, and you're like, because Keely actually died after Fili, he was technically the Crown Prince of Erebor for a little while. For 20 minutes.
But, do any characters actually know that they died in that order?
Maybe not, but the movie certainly knows that. And you know what? It's something like someone would say because they found it out. And yeah, they'd say it at a funeral, and then someone would be like, hey, just stop talking. This is not the time to be talking about this.
Yeah, or do you think when I speak, I should mention that we hear mourning the Crown Prince? No.
But like, it's fine because technically they were both crown princes.
Yeah.
No,
so it's like it's not taking anything away from his brother.
I don't think he should focus on
it. Maybe just talk about his girlfriend.
But Keely was the crown prince of Erebor for like a little while, like half an hour. He's still who is it now? It could still be him. Maybe they didn't have any ears.
Does anyone know who the Crown Prince is?
And then the guy gets up to do a speech, and he's like, the last thing, I love Feely, I love Keely. They were both dear to me. And do you know that because Feely died before Keely, and the guy who's telling him not to like face palms in the crowd, Keely was the Crown Prince of Erebor for a little while.
This is now my continue the franchise.
Well, before we continue the franchise, Richard, one thing we have to talk about is titles, because we talk about them a lot on this podcast.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Hobbit film subtitles, particularly the last two, which feel real like grandiose and fantastical in contrast to like the like An Unexpected Journey is very Bilbo focused and therefore Hobbit focused, and the film's called The Hobbit, right? So originally the second of the two films was, as I said before, was going to be called There and Back Again, which is obviously a nod to Bilbo's autobiography.
There and Bakugan.
And this was then moved to the third film, which was then changed to The Battle of the Five Armies for like a completely valid reason that it's like, well, it's not really about, the There and Back.
Yeah, it's not about the journey back. Although, I mean, it was one of those things where Peter Jackson was like, actually, we never said it was called There and Back Again. That was always just the name of the box set.
I found plenty of sources online that said it was called There and Back Again.
Yeah, I know, but it's one of these classic, but yeah, he said that was always the intended name of the eventual,
right.
You'd refer to this as like The Hobbit There and Back Again, this franchise.
So I think I said last week that I really liked the idea of the second film being called Into the Fire, which is
out of the frying pan into the fire is like 2 chapters there.
Yeah, I think so, and they say it in An Unexpected Journey.
Yeah.
And Into the Fire has all sorts of wonderful Smaug, imagery that's conjured up. But that being said, if it was called Into the Fire, it needed to have Smaug's death, or at least him burning Lake Town at the end, because that's the only real, Into the Fire moment of it.
I guess going into Smaug's mountain, you're entering the fire, essentially.
And the last thing I thought as well, and again, as usual with these titles, I'm not that passionate about this, but I'd be interested to hear because I think in my own head, and I'd be interested to hear.
And I often tell you that your titles are dumb.
Exactly. So I think The King Under the Mountain would have potentially been a cool title, if not for the third film, but for the whole trilogy. I think it sounds a little more on brand when stacked next to Lord of the Rings. You've got the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the King Under the Mountain trilogy. And at least then the fact that, the Hobbit, the titular character, is suspiciously, relegated to the background for a lot of the last two films. This would not, it wouldn't be without precedent. People couldn't be like, why is the Hobbit barely in the last two Hobbit movies?
Yeah. Yeah, my only thought is it wouldn't really make sense for the first film, and I think it would work better for a book. I think it's too long to have The King Under the Mountain and then a subtitle.
But it's the same amount of words as Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I know, but the words are longer. Mountain? God, how many letters is that? 19?
That's so long. You're right. All right.
I get where you're coming from, but
it's a cool. It is a cool title in and of itself, though. I think.
Right, yeah.
Imagine if they'd called instead of Battle of the Five Armies, that is The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, The Hobbit, The Return of the King. All right, so
but we also talk about taglines now, don't we?
I don't have them any written down. Do you?
Oh, well, I don't know. I guess you don't have every segment.
Wow, that's true. You're right. I failed you as a friend and as an artist. So last,
I like that discussion we had was off pod though. So
yeah, true.
so this is just going to have no context. Level.
Much like a lot of the things that happen in all of the Lord of the Rings films, no context to explain this. So last episode we put a thing out on Facebook and was like, "What are your favorite scenes from Lord of the Rings?" And we got like 30-something comments, like everyone sort of saying like what they loved. I put out a post again last week that said, what are your favourite scenes in the Hobbit trilogy? And we got way less comments on this post. So here are a few answers that we got. Jeremy says levitating Legolas. So he runs up the falling bridge in the Battle of the Five Armies.
It's so stupid. It looks... And they have... Because it's like, you could have like a couple of steps and it would look all right. So it's like these bricks are like falling and he's like jumping off each of them. But they cut to a shot from him like front on concentrating and it makes it look like this is actually real hard to do, but it's so stupid.
Emma says, when the dwarves sing in Bilbo's living room, because I always thought that the songs were boring in the book, but that was pretty cool. Kind of all downhill from there though. Scott says the scene where Thorin's recruiting officer asks Bilbo, "Who are your people?" Don't think I remember that scene. Scott says Scott Dora 11 on Instagram says the trailer for the first film, they had the tone nailed down. Then after the first 30 minutes of the film, things slowly started going downhill. I guess I liked the first interaction with Smaug, and if you put the scene where Smaug gets shot at the end of the second film, it would have been cooler. He also says the vlogs and the behind the scenes were still on point though. Because that's something we haven't really talked about.
That brings up something I wanted to discuss. Do you remember when it was like revealed that these movies weren't very good? Like people were looking forward to the first one. People thought like going into them that they'd be amazing, right?
I remember making the astute observation that these were the new prequel trilogies before the first one came out.
Right.
So
interesting. Yeah, because I can't remember like going into it if I thought. I remember seeing it in like January though, so it was like it had been out for a month, and thinking like, oh yeah, I'll just get it over and done with. Yeah, so
I think the main thing I remember about the first film before I saw it that people were saying was that it's way too long.
Yeah, because like I remember like I don't remember it, but like the Phantom Menace, it wasn't until people were in the cinema that they realised it was bad.
Yeah. I don't think it was a case of that. I think it was way more publicised in this case. And just the fact that it was splitting a tiny book into 3 movies, I think.
Yeah. Because I remember even, because when I saw Ian McKellen, it was in 2012, so that's when the same year as first Hobbit came. So I saw him like 6 months. And he kind of, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he kind of didn't speak positively about it being split.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Jack_Bishop says Thorin and Azog's fight and eventual deaths, Gollum's riddle scene, and most scenes with Smaug as Benedict Cumberbatch is brilliant in this. And the last fan comment for favourite scenes is from Ben, who again is one of our patrons, who says, probably the first time Bilbo's sword glows blue, and then one of the dwarves is like, they told me you'd have a little blue sword, they didn't say anything about a little blue man, which again is a reference to Big Fat Liar, which is a film that on our Patreon he's desperately trying to get us to watch, but we will not unless people vote for it. Cool. Okay. So, Richard, let's do it. Let's continue the franchise. So this is a segment where we kind of pitch our ideas for sequels or whatever. While there are plenty of like Middle-earth adjacent projects going on or have existed, a few of which we talked about in the last episode. There's nothing really expanding upon specifically The Hobbit in production. Surprise, surprise. Again, the only thing of note would be the Amazon TV series, which actually had a mild update, Richard, since we spoke about it last.
Yes.
Because you said that Peter Jackson was asked if he's going to be involved, and he essentially said, fuck no. But according to Slash Film, Peter Jackson might be involved, or at least he's not involved. Yes. That was the last statement that they released a couple days ago about it. I also found out apparently the series is going to tell new stories within Middle-earth, and there's been a long-standing rumor that it'll be an Aragorn-focused prequel, which frankly sounds like a pretty bad idea.
Yeah,
on paper.
it's and also just in the last like 24 hours of recording this, they've released like the map. They've started the map marketing campaign, and apparently the map they've released extends further east than most versions.
Oh, interesting.
Far beyond the Sea of Rhone.
One thing I did find interesting though is that this isn't like exactly continuing the franchise, but it's worth mentioning here, is back when the Hobbit trilogy was only going to be 2 films, did you know that the original plan was to make the first film The Hobbit and the second film one that, like a fictional film, like one that's not based on a book that bridges the gap between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings?
Right, like when Peter Jackson was involved, you're talking about?
No, Guillermo del Toro as well.
Right, yeah.
Like, both of them were like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make The Hobbit and then the film that bridges the gap between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
Interesting.
This film would have possibly featured storylines following Gollum getting to Mordor and Aragorn setting watch on the Shire, which sounds like thrilling stuff. And worse than the shitty trilogy we already got, to be honest. So, like, I didn't see... When I was reading Del Toro's statements on it, because he was the one who announced actually, I think we will just split The Hobbit into 2 films. I reckon he always thought this was a bad idea and was just like biding his time, knowing when to play his cards before he said that they shouldn't do it that way. All right, so my idea for continuing the franchise is editing all 6 fucking films together in chronological order and maybe use it as a torture device. People have to watch all the extended editions. Start with Gollum finding the ring.
Nice.
And then all of the Hobbits, except for the opening bookends.
The bookends will just be like this weird thing where he's like, it goes from the Hobbit to then like 1 or 2 scenes from Lord of the Rings, and then Bilbo being like, I remember this.
Yeah.
Yep, that sure was fun to remember.
No well wishes, solicitors, and it's like they don't change the frame rate between the films. It briefly cuts to like 48 frames per second. All right, what's your idea, Richard?
So there's a line of dialogue in An Unexpected Journey where Bilbo's like, "How many wizards are there?" And he's like, and Gandalf's like, "Well, you've got me, the Grey. There's Saruman the White, Radagast the Brown, who we meet in these films, played by Sylvester McCoy." Who's just the fucking stupidest character. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, "Oh, there's 2 blue ones, but I forget their names." And then that's it.
And it's like the most intriguing line in the whole franchise.
So I would like to see a movie about those 2 blue wizards. Now, I'm sure they exist in the canon and you can look up their names, but I like the idea of doing like, are you familiar with like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead?
Yeah.
It's a sequel to Hamlet that takes place at the same time, and it has them being like responsible for things off screen. And it's also the inspiration for The Lion King 1.5.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing? Because I said off screen?
No, because I can tell where this is going.
And so I would like to see the 2 blue wizards being like responsible for every plot hole in both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Like, I'd love that if they were like, and so I'd also like, it'd be fun to just do a completely different genre. So like have like Key and Peele play them, or like maybe the Ab Fab girls, Jonah Lumley and what's the other one's name?
Dawn.
No, Dawn French is Vicar Dibley.
I'll look them up.
Ab Fab. Here we go. So you got Jennifer Saunders and Jonah Lumley, and like have them, because there's not enough female characters. It'd be cool if they had some
female wizards.
Yeah. So have them be responsible for things. So trying to think of, I don't know if you've got any as well. That would be good. But I was thinking like maybe they were like when the whole Fly You Fools thing, and then they actually got to where the eagles were waiting for them to fly, but the blue wizards somehow like
scared them away,
and they were like, "Oh shit!" and then so they were actually just like waiting on the other side of where Gandalf falls. The eagles like, "Fly, you fools!" The eagles are right outside.
Yeah,
and then but turns out they scared them away. And then like, what else is there? They were driving the car that's seen when Sam says, "Oh, if I go any further, this will be the furthest I've ever been."
Yeah. Well, they were creating the dust cloud. I found out apparently it's just a dust cloud that you see.
Yeah. But like they're responsible for that light flicker. Have you got any other major plot holes?
The thing I noticed, and I don't know how you'd fix this with the Blue Wizards, but you see Ian Holm's Bilbo grab the ring in a flashback in Fellowship of the Ring, and he looks like Ian Holm and not like Martin Freeman.
Right.
So I wonder if there's like a way that the Blue Wizards are responsible for that.
Yeah.
The Blue Wizards cast a spell over Middle Earth at the start of The Hobbit, which makes everything glisten. And that's why everything's painted with CGI.
Yeah. Or you have, like, so they've been around since, like, the dawn of time, and they run into Smeagol, who's just, like, played by Andy Serkis. And Andy Serkis is like, "Oh, hello." Smeagol's like, "Hello, how do you do, you fine ladies?" And one of them trips and knocks his trachea, and he's like, and that's why he talks like that as when he's just a normal hobbit.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man. That's really good.
Yeah, so like I just love to see, like, it could even be like a comic book, just like a fun little thing, because there's like, is it like Tag and Binks? There's for the Star Wars, like these two guys are responsible for every plot hole. But yeah, I think the Blue Wizards, because they already exist in the canon, would be a fun way to explore that.
Cool. They do have names. I can't remember what they are either. I'm like Gandalf.
Yeah.
But I did find out.
I'm like Gandalf.
Yeah, I'm in every way possible. I did find out though that apparently the reason they can't say their names is because while the Blue Wizards are mentioned in the Lord of the Rings, their names are mentioned in the Silmarillion, which they don't have the rights to. Which is a pretty fun way to get around that. A weird little meta reference to the fact that they don't have the names. Cool. Okay. Well, that,
like, you could just not have Bilbo ask.
Yeah. True. Yeah. And instead, like the idea of the Blue Wizards is like one of for me, it's a textbook case of like a throwaway line expanding a world in a way that's like, what do you mean? Like, I want to know more about that.
But it's funny, like Gandalf's answer is like he knows about the rights, because like Peter, you know about the rights. You could have just not had Bilbo ask, but it's like, Bilbo's a real person and asked him, and Gandalf was like, "Oh fuck, I can't mention them. I'll just say I don't remember."
Yeah.
But it's unknown if this was intentional.
Yeah. Hey, so what we're going to do now, Richard, that about does our podcast on the Hobbit trilogy. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to announce what the next franchise we're doing is in just a second. This one was voted by our Patreon.
Well, yeah, normally we would, but we're going to have to do something a little bit different, AJ.
Yeah, I know. But before we get to that, if you like this podcast, please consider supporting it on Patreon, patreon.com/cultpopture. And you can also find us on Facebook and give us a like there. Find us on YouTube and give us a subscribe. Follow us on Twitter. Tweet Walter Casotto if you want, and get him to come and appear on the show. You can also find us on Instagram, where we post pictures of the movies we're watching. You can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes, obviously, where you're listening to this now. And you can also email us at cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. Please leave a comment, tell us what you thought of this episode or what you thought of the Hobbit movies. Okay, we've got a problem, Richard, because every second franchise is decided by a Patreon vote. So we say, hey, vote for comment a franchise suggestion, and the one with the most likes from other patrons will win. And this week, we've got a stalemate. We've got the two National Treasure films, and Big Fat Liar and Bigger Fatter Liar. They've both got the same amount of votes. And this, up until yesterday, this wasn't the case. I was watching it and National Treasure was winning, but now it looks like Big Fat Liar is up there. What is the best practice? How do we decide? I can tell you which one I'd rather do.
Well, yeah, I mean, we also just narrowly missed out. They've both got one more vote than the Pokemon movie franchise, which has like 20-something.
Yeah.
But yeah, normally what we do when we do our other podcasts for the Patreon is post a poll.
It's too late.
Well, we can post a poll and then record a little extra second tomorrow announcing what it is.
I can't.
Oh, yeah.
I'm real busy for the rest until this gets released. I have to edit this as soon as we finish recording. Okay.
Should we flip a coin?
Do you have a coin on you?
Yeah, I'll just grab one.
Wait, no, we need it to be audible though, because you could be making it up. Okay, start filming.
No, I'll get the random number generator.
Okay, just between 1 and 2.
Yeah. Or no, I'll do like a random number between like 0 and 200, and if it's greater than 100...
Well, if it's odd or even.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So, which one should be which?
Well, you decide.
Big Fat Liar is odd and National Treasure is even.
Okay, so it's between 0 and 294.
Okay.
Wait, what did you say?
112.
I said Big Fat Liar is odd and National Treasure is even.
212.
It's even! We're on National Treasure, baby!
Suck it, Ben, you
Fuck
idiot.
you, Ben! Thank you for your monthly donations, actually, Ben. We greatly appreciate it. And, you know, from a content perspective, I think it's funnier to drag out the Big Fat Liar like debacle for more than a couple episodes. So we've lived to die another day with National Treasure being our next franchise. The 2 National Treasure films.
Yep.
Oh, fuck, that was close, bro. I really don't want to watch Big Fat Liar and Bigger Fatter Liar.
Well, the thing about Big Fat Liar is I just don't think it's going to make a very good podcast. It's not interesting.
No, we'll have to, like, get drunk for it or something. Like, we'll have to do something to, like, open up the... Maybe we could be big fat liars and lie about the plots of the whole movies. You know? We could have lied and gone with National Treasure, even if we got Big Fat Liar, and just be like, well, yeah, we're keeping in theme with the movie. It's about liars. All right, so that's it. Tune in next week next week to hear us talk about the Oscars. I should say now, actually, that the episode is going to come out a little later in the day because the day that the podcast comes out is the same day as the Oscars. So we're actually going to record it after the Oscars and release it probably Monday night New Zealand time as opposed to Monday morning New Zealand time.
Yes.
And then the week after that, we're going to be covering the 2 National Treasure set movies.
What are we doing the week after that?
We don't think we have anything planned, do we?
Feel free to comment your suggestions.
We need to call Peter Jackson and be like, "Hey man, we need an off the fly plan for our 3rd episode from now. Can you tell us? Just think of something quickly." We love you, Peter Jackson, but please make something better.